We're doing something a little bit different today. It's so beautiful outside. It's warm enough for me to be outside without a jacket, and I hopped on my bike. I want to be able to show you what it's like to live in Vancouver in the spring. This is my favorite time of year. It's early going yet. It's still very early in the spring, of course. There's signs of spring, but there's also some leftover vestiges of winter as well, and I'm going to get into all of it, help you understand what it's like to be here in the spring, and also what it's like to be buying a home right now in the Vancouver real estate market. Let's get into it right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver BC team. If you're new here, this channel is all about living in and moving to Vancouver, and I put out videos just like this one every single week. This week we're talking about Vancouver in spring, what the market's like right now, and why Vancouver is such an amazing place at this time of year. I'm going to try and do this while biking around Vancouver and not get myself or anyone else killed. I'm driving on some quiet side streets to make sure that everything's okay. But I really did want to get a little exercise, also get out and about and really show you what the streets are like right now. But as I said, this time of year really is where Vancouver shines. It is my favorite time of year. Every day is really better than the last. And spring this year started, we're right now on the last day of February. It's February 28th, 2025. Spring, I would say, started about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago. You could start feeling that there was no longer a chill in the air. It didn't get quite as cold in the middle of the night. Things were starting to warm up through the day. So right now, it looks like most of the weather is kind of around 10 degrees or so for the next little while, the foreseeable future. My handy Apple device is telling me that for the next week or so, that there's no rain. We're looking at about 7 to 12 degrees, kind of in that range of temperature. And that's quite often sort of the indication that that winter is over. Just 2 weeks ago, we still had a whole lot of snow in Vancouver, and that snow was here for 2 full weeks. I think I mentioned before that that's pretty unusual that we have snow in the city for that length of time. But before you know it, it's disappeared and there's no traces of snow anymore. My daughter was in the car with me the other day and she's like, "Dad, where did all the snow go?" Every day is getting a little bit brighter, a little bit warmer. There's less rain. Even if it is raining, it's like not as pessimistic. There's an optimism in the air, which is something that I really love about spring in Vancouver. Everybody's nature just kind of shifts and everybody's a little bit happier. Everybody's looking forward to what's to come. And that's the warmer, drier summer months where, in my view, Vancouver really shines and is at its best. So this is the time of year sort of where those winter activities start to dwindle. Hockey season ends, at least for kids. Skating lessons end. The ski hills might be running out of snow. And if you want to go spring skiing, you got to go up to Whistler and Blackcomb. So the local mountains are going to be gearing down a little bit. It's not likely to be snowing too much more up in those mountains, but it's still early days yet in the spring, and we are, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere in Canada, and we can still have winter. So my mother reminded me of this morning, that there's quite often, or not uncommonly, do we have snow still in the month of March and maybe even into early April. But that would be pretty unusual getting into April with snow. Certainly, perhaps one more little fall of snow in March might not be all that unexpected, and a dip in the temperature a bit, but it's definitely in the direction. It's very obviously in the direction of summer eventually and spring immediately. And so people are, as I'm driving around here on my bike, and you can see signs of spring. You can see there's flowers blooming. There's the very early cherry blossoms are already out, and there's buds on the trees. The grass is green. That is one of the things I think that people from other places in Canada really do enjoy about Vancouver, is this early spring where the rest of Canada is still often frozen or perhaps under snow. You might still have a snowstorm. There might still be ice. And here in Vancouver, this is part of the reason that many people in the rest of Canada love to hate Vancouver, because the people here start to brag about getting out on their bike like this and not wearing a winter coat, or the flowers and the growth and the green. And that really is something in Vancouver, that even in the middle of winter, you still see green everywhere. But certainly now, as you know, the very early signs of spring are there, the city is already pretty lush and green. I mean, you can see the trees in behind me. They don't have any green on them, the deciduous trees, but they are having little buds on them, and the growth is coming, and there are flowers. In fact, I can see some flowers here just below this tree right here. Can you see those? Yeah. and gives a little bit of hope and optimism. And it makes winter a little less dreary, you know, like at this point, it's pretty clear that we made it through the worst of it. And Vancouver winters, while they're not incredibly cold, while they're not incredibly snow-filled, we do get snow. As I mentioned, we had about a foot for a couple weeks on the ground here just a few weeks ago. But the winters can be onerous, you know, like they can feel, the winters are dark, they're wet. And even though the temperature isn't like crazy below freezing, it is cold. And I find the chill that you get here when it's say 4 degrees Celsius and it's raining out and you come in from, you know, the walk from your car to the office or something, that chill that you get is really hard to get rid of. So that's part of what makes this time of year special in my mind, because there is no more chill. The chill is gone. I'm able to get out here. I'm wearing pants and a sweatshirt, but no coat whatsoever. And I'm not cycling too hard, but it's actually, there's a bit of a breeze, but it's really warm and sunny and bright. And there's a lot of people out just enjoying the sunshine. And this is when, as I said, there's a little tick up in the optimism here in Vancouver. You don't feel quite so heavily loaded with the weight of the world and your own responsibilities and whatever else is going on. Everything feels a little bit easier. And I think that goes a long way for everybody's mental health, whether you're these kids out playing or, I don't know, business person downtown or a grandparent going for a walk around the seawall with their dog or something like that, you know? So these are all the reasons that I really love this time of year in Vancouver. I'm looking forward to longer days. This time of year, you know, we're starting to see, I noticed in the last week or so, in that week or 10 days, it's no longer dark when I pick up my kids from daycare, you know, around 5:30 p.m. In the middle of winter, you're dropping them off in the dark and you're picking them up in the dark. And already that is, you know, we're two months approximately from the shortest day of the year. And so, like, I don't know, I think the sun is probably setting around 6:30 to 7 now. It's much brighter in the mornings. It's a lot easier to get the kids out of bed. It's a lot easier for me to get out of bed. I find in the summer months, I like to get stuff done and I feel so much more accomplished. In the winter months, it's so much harder to get out of bed and be motivated, whether that's getting on your bike, going outside, or going for a workout, a walk around the block or something like that after dinner. All those things are just way harder in the winter months, I find. You really have to push yourself to do it. And days like today just make everything a whole lot easier. But as I said, there still are signs of winter. Can't quite see the mountain. You know, you can kind of see them in there behind me. There's still snow, a lot of snow up there in the mountains. And then in as much as temperatures are rising down here, I mean, I think a lot of this week we're looking at around 10 to 12 degrees. And very soon, probably within 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be looking at temperatures that are getting up and are close to or just over 20 degrees. Up there in the mountains, it's still very much winter, and it's going to be winter quite often until June. The Grouse Grind is a trail that I do a lot or used to do a lot, and that trail often doesn't open until even like mid-June or so, because so much of it is snowbound and there's a danger of avalanches. But even higher in the mountains, it's worse. So you can only really be guaranteed that there's areas in the backcountry up there without snow in July. The beginning of July is really sort of the beginning of that season. So there's a big disparity between what's going on up there in those mountains. Those are real mountains versus sort of the experience that we have down here. So once again, Vancouver in the spring, this is where it shines. This is what I love. So early signs of spring in Vancouver, one would be snow is gone, more consistent temperatures over 0 degrees, starting to see little flowers, we're starting to see the cherry blossoms, we're starting to see the buds on trees. But the other major indication that spring is on its way is construction season. And as I wander around the neighborhood, I'm seeing all sorts of construction everywhere. I mean, right in behind me here, you can see the new house being built. That kind of stuff is happening year round, but it's really the main city works that we're seeing springing up all over the city. And just in the last couple of weeks, I've been noticing that it's a lot harder to get from one point to another through Metro Vancouver, as every city sort of is realizing that it's the end of the deep freeze and the torrential downpours. Not that we have too many torrential downpours, but essentially that the end of the winter season is here, and they're starting the big projects that they do in the drier weather and the better weather. So lots of streets getting torn up, lots of big construction projects getting underway, and that is something that we all just kind of have to deal with. And I think it's pretty consistent through all of Canada that this happens, but it does make getting around Vancouver a little more challenging at this time of year, that's for sure. Another sign of spring is the sound of birds. They stopped right now. But everything comes to life. It's truly magical. So thinking about real estate in Vancouver, of course, I am a real estate agent in Vancouver, and I've helped hundreds of families move to Vancouver, find the right area, and find the right home. And I can help you and your family do that as well. Whenever you're ready, my contact information is right there on the screen. Be sure to reach out anytime at all. But for now, let's get back to the video. What is our real estate market like? Well, in the spring is generally when activity picks up, and this is very common again in the Northern Hemisphere, that the spring season is sort of the selling season. And you see April, May, and June being the peak months of activity in the market and the most number of sales. That's when the most buyers are out there and they're looking actively. And generally, it's driven by the weather to a large degree. I mean, everything starts to look a whole lot better at this time of year and in the coming months than it did just a couple months ago. And you can see in the last couple months, I myself haven't been outside doing videos because it's kind of been miserable a lot of the time, and it's hard to get out when the days are short and it's raining and dark. It's hard to get good shots. It's hard to be looking at my best and not drenched or freezing cold and shivering. And so a lot of the time in the last couple months, I've been doing videos inside, and it's sort of the same thing with shopping for real estate. A lot of people aren't really all that interested. They don't want to sell their home at that time of the year because it's not going to be looking its best. The gardens aren't looking that great. You want to sell a home when it looks spectacular, ideally, and you're going to be motivated to buy something when it's looking its best, generally. So a lot more activity takes place. And then the other thing is there's a lot of people that are looking to get their families into a new home by the start of the new school year. And so for that reason, families might be buying in May and June, looking to close towards the end of the summer, maybe August and early September, so that basically the kids get settled into their new homes before the start of the new school year. And so a lot of activity starts to happen April, May, and June, but it starts early. Just as spring is starting in terms of the weather, spring kind of starts in the real estate market starting in mid-February. You start to see pretty good listings start to appear on the market. People that are motivated to get moving early and maybe sell their home so they're free to buy something as the market picks up, as more supply comes onto the market, because that's generally what we see. Supply is really low around the beginning of the year at New Year, and then it slowly starts to build, usually. And then demand, the number of buyers that are out there looking, also is relatively slow at the beginning. There's buyers out there, they're kicking tires, but they're not really doing much. They're not super motivated just yet. Some of the listings that usually get placed at this time of the year, just nothing really happens with them, you know? It's the really special listings that can do really well because they stand out early in the year. And this can be an excellent time as a buyer to get something that you really like, that really works for you within your budget before the market picks up too much, before there's too much competition and things start to potentially get too crazy. Now, that doesn't happen every year. It really does depend on what's happening in the market. And this year is a bit unusual in that we have a lot of supply in the market. There's way more inventory. We're looking at about roughly 30% over our 10-year average for inventory right now. Demand has been decent. So the amount of demand that's been in the market really picked up towards the end of last year, and that surprised a lot of people. It hasn't been spectacular, but it's getting closer to that 10-year average. Now, things were looking really positive for the market. We were getting maybe a little bit into that seller's market, but certainly a balanced market that was looking a little more positive. And it was looking like the decline in interest rates was really sparking a sort of a resurgence in demand. And everything for people that owned real estate in Vancouver was looking much more positive than it had in the last few years. Now, that is until there's sort of been a lot more uncertainty that has entered the market by sort of the discussion or the politics and what's happening south of the border of us. Talk of tariffs and talk of a 51st state. These things are adding a lot of uncertainty to our market right now. And as yet, it's a bit unclear of how that's going to impact our market. I did make a video last week all about the impact or potential impact of tariffs if they are put in place. And I do think that there's some positives that may happen in Vancouver's real estate market. and there's a fair number of negatives. So there's some things that I'm really concerned about based on these tariffs, and there's some things that I'm not really worried about at all. But what I am concerned about is the psychology of the market and how the tariffs might really impact. I get into a lot more of that detail in the video I did last week, so be sure to check that out. But getting back to what our market is like right now, there's some signs of life, but there's also some areas that are weak, and in particular luxury type properties. The downtown core, anything that is considered luxury property is really struggling, whereas investor oriented, first time buyer oriented type stuff, there's been a bit of a resurgence in the last few months, as I think those people are particularly rate sensitive, and they're seeing that rates are coming down, that there's an opportunity in the market, and prices aren't skyrocketing, but also that prices have remained relatively robust for, well, really the last couple of years. So peak price that we saw in the spring of 2022, 3 years later, we've sort of been moving sideways. There's been some periods we haven't been above that, but we've come close to it and then we fall off. But for most areas of the market, we're still within 1 or 2% of peak pricing, despite how much inventory there was last year and how little demand there was last year. And so there's a lot of people that feel that with the likelihood of interest rates declining and the possibility that tariffs may really see inflation returning, it's more than likely that real estate prices are going to be pushed upwards. So there are people who are motivated to sort of step into the market before it gets a little too crazy, step into the market and find something that they like at prices that they like, sort of on a timeline that they like. And those possibilities exist in the market today. I don't want to predict too much about where the market is headed. Could go a number of different ways. We all have to sort of, that the main advice that I usually give to my clients is you step into the market when it makes sense for you, right? And yes, you want to be paying attention to what's going on globally and regionally and locally, sort of on an economic level. But most importantly, it has to make sense for you personally, economically, and also in terms of your own personal motivation, right? So if you just had triplets and you find a good home that you like that's within your budget, sort of meets your expectations, and you're able to get a decent deal on it, or at least what you feel is a decent deal, then timing may be right no matter what, right? You just have to feel comfortable with that decision. And you may find that taking in all this information, you may not feel comfortable doing that right now, or you might feel really comfortable doing it in a month from now. I just wanted to add about the way that the market is behaving right now because of the uncertainty. I do feel we're just at the end of February now, and so we don't have the stats for February. I have a feeling that things are probably taking a little bit of a pause. I have been noticing a little bit of hesitation with all the uncertainty that's come into the market with the talks of the tariffs and the talks of the 51st state. People are just hesitating a little bit. I don't think it's going to last long. That's my look into my foggy crystal ball, but I do think that the numbers for February may be impacted to some degree because of the level of uncertainty that's in the market right now. And that is something that I just wanted to recognize about the way that the market is behaving. There is a lot of uncertainty around what's going on right now. A lot of signs that things are moving in a very positive direction, a very strong position for sellers in particular. And what I would say, it was looking like a real opportunity for buyers to get into the market. Now, there is this degree of uncertainty that it could go any number of different ways. And I think that there are a number of people that are sort of rethinking what exactly they're doing in the market and what makes sense for them and how certain they are of their own future. And of course, that's where a certain degree of drop in demand comes in. But I have a feeling that if interest rates continue to fall, that is really just going to be a temporary shift that will not have a long-term effect on our market. I hope my little tour gave you an idea of what it's like to live here in the spring and also what the real estate market is like. And I know a lot of you are thinking of moving here, so it's a really important part. If you're thinking of moving here and buying a home, of course, you want to know what the real estate market is like, and there are differences all through the year. So I hope that gave you a clear idea. And of course, if you are thinking of buying a home, I am a realtor that's lived in Vancouver my entire life and have helped hundreds of people move to and settle in Vancouver, helping them find the right area and find the right home. And I can help you and your family as well when the time is right. But if it's not quite time, I totally understand that. And that's why I have this channel, and that's why I make these videos. So be sure to check out my huge backlog of videos. I have over 100 of them that answer just about every single question you might have about what it's like to live in Vancouver and what it's like to move to Vancouver. So be sure to check all those videos out, or whichever ones might interest you. And in the meantime, I thank you so much for watching this video. Definitely check out my last video all about the impacts of tariffs, or the potential tariffs, on the Vancouver real estate market. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to see you on next week's video.